I'm Ebong.
And I'm Sonya.
And today we are dishing with you from the brand new Tacklebox in Cleveland Park. This is their second location.
It's located at 3407 Connecticut Avenue Northwest.
And for those who don't know, Tacklebox is known for its seafood, shellfish, as you can tell by the lobster. Even the corn on the cob is great.
Karim Chrobog. He's a filmmaker. He's probably made some films locally that you have heard about. One in particular about a refugee.
Our last story is that of a former Southern Sudanese child soldier called Emmanuel Jar, who was a refugee, a child soldier, and is now an international hip-hop artist and a star.
Yeah, we've been hearing a lot about this one lately because you had a pretty local team, actually.
Everybody was local indeed. The crew was all DC-based, and we had some great experience. We traveled to Southern Sudan and to the refugee camps in Kenya, and sort of toured the film around the world afterwards for what it could solve.
I went to the screening. I just put two and two together. I mean, we met before, but I put two and two together and realized you're the one who did Lost Boys. So that's. I remember I went to the screening, National Geographic, and that's so. It was a great picture.
Thank you.
It was so moving.
Yeah, I told you that people locally had seen it.
Yeah.
So it's one of these inspirational stories that you can find somebody who comes through a really terrible conflict where over 2 million people died and come out of this and become a hip-hop star and an activist and a speaker for your country. It's really interesting.
How do you find your stories?
Everywhere. We find our stories in newspapers, traveling the world pretty much.
You have a big book of story ideas.
The problem is not finding stories. The problem is making the film. But stories has never been a problem.
Do you focus primarily on documentaries, or do you do other fictional, non-fiction? What?
My heart is in documentaries because it gives you that reality that you often don't find in narrative films. That said, we are now actually doing some narrative work as well. We're doing a film about an Algerian independence fighter who took on the French Empire of the time and battled them for about 20 years. So it's sort of the brave heart of Arabia.
The brave heart
I like
of Arabia.
That.
That's great.
It also sounds like you do quite a bit of traveling to put these together, but
Yes.
your company is called 18th Street Films.
Here's the problem: we're very creative at making movies. We're not very creative in terms of company titles. And we had a filing deadline, and we were on 18th Street at the time, and that was the name that stuck.
It
and
would
it worked.
be worse if you chose the street that you weren't actually on.
That's correct, right?
Your documentaries, you go with reality. Right?
Here we go. It worked out.
If we were to do a documentary of you and your life while you're doing this, what would that be like? What's it like to be a filmmaker doing these documentaries?
Oh, you would spend a lot of time on planes. I'm about to leave for a 19-hour flight to Singapore tomorrow and then to Sri Lanka. So you'd be spending a lot of time on planes. The filming part is actually quite short. It's the setup, the pre-production, the production, and then the editing of the film. It's a thrill.
What story do you dream of telling? What's your ultimate story? Like, your dream documentary. Oh, I wish I had made that one.
I have a film about actually I'm half Egyptian, so as a partly Middle Easterner, I have a great affinity for that part of the world. And I've always wanted to do a film about a Moroccan adventurer called Ibn Battuta, who went down as the greatest traveler of world history. He traveled about 75,000 miles over a period of 29 years.
Wow.
He left to do a small stop over in a neighboring country and came back 30 years later. And it's one of these incredible stories of resilience and he was a real explorer in the true sense of the word.
Great.
There's just so many stories there to talk
I can't
about.
even. I'm just like, mouth's open.
Well, how do you find funding? Because you said
Yeah.
that's the hardest thing to do is, you can have these great ideas, you can have a great team, but you have to actually have money to make it happen.
That is true. That's probably the biggest challenge any documentary filmmaker would probably attest to. But you find a good group of people who support. You go back to them. They have great foundations. We've worked with the MacArthur Foundation. We've worked with the Global Fund for Children. And, we have a deal with a development deal with HBO right now, so we're doing a project with them. So after it gets easier,
once you have a track record.
You do, yes. But still, you write 100 proposals, and if you're lucky, you get one financed. So that's it.
Entertainment is constantly changing, and people have a very short attention span, and the trends are always different. But do you think that documentary films are where it's at? I mean, is that where you think that filmmaking is going? Because the other stories are just the same story again and again and again, but with the documentary, it's always unique and different.
That's actually a really interesting question, because I think this is one of the big debates in documentaries. I mean, more people see documentaries than ever before because we have the online phenomenon, but also more people make documentaries because they become much cheaper. But I think documentaries really can bring you to some of the most untold and unknown places of this planet. And I think it's a great art form and sort of cultural preservation as well, because if you're not telling the stories about a conflict or a genocide or a natural disaster that's going on, who will? And you can create a connection with your audience that you can't do to narrative film. So it's a really powerful medium, which why I like it. But it's also, it's a great risk. You spend years making a film and you hope somebody will see it and like it.
Do you consider yourself a historian as well?
I would say I'm more drawn to the investigation of things rather than the history. I try to find out what's really going on.
Do you have a favorite documentary that is not one you worked on? Do you watch one over and over and over again?
I love documentaries. I watched one called Man on Wire about and I like it because the story is great. It has all the drama of any film ever made, but it's also artistically extremely pleasing, which is great, and the music is great. so it keeps going.
Well, we look forward to seeing your next film.
And we've got to let you leave because you've got to get on a flight and go to Sudan and halfway across the world. But
Singapore this time. Much cleaner, a little bit cleaner, but
a little bit.
You never know. He might go for a quick stopover and stay for 30 years.
I would miss you guys too much.
Karim, thank you so much for all that you're doing, for being a historian, for documenting everything interesting, and for providing entertainment for us to watch here locally, being a great personality.
Thanks for having me.
And thanks for being with us.
Thank you, guys.
And as always, thank you for being with us here on this episode of The District Dish.